Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline, the hotly anticipated follow-up to Ready Player 1, finally landed last year, and well, it's a tricky one. I loved the first book. I enjoyed the story, the characters. I felt as if the book moved forward at a fantastic pace and almost never let up. The references were perfect for someone my age, and if I was to name a top 10 favourite books, it would definitely be a contender. It therefore pains me to say that my relationship with this book has been somewhat different. The story takes place not long after the events of the first book. Our protagonist, Wade, learns that James Halliday had developed a different way of interacting with the Oasis through a neural interface, which would allow users a far more immersive experience, as well as allowing users to record their own life experiences so that others can relive those experiences themselves. Wade's decision to make the technology available to the public prompts a new contest to appear in the Oasis. The point of the contest to collect the 7 shards of the Siren's soul. At the same time, Halliday's old avatar returns, having gone rogue, and holds the whole of the Oasis hostage, putting everyone's lives at risk, including our heroes. Let's start with the premise. Although I quite like the idea of Halliday's avatar returning and going mad, I was a little disappointed that the plot would once again revolve around another contest. It kind of felt like the author has gone down this route because it worked in the first book, so why not try it again here? Then unfortunately, once the story starts being told, we have to get through what felt like a very slow beginning. The fast pace of the original is gone completely, and the opening chapters feel like somewhat of a chore. It's nice finding out what happened to each of the characters since we last saw them, but the problem comes in how we are being given this information by Wade, who has become very unlikable. Since winning the contest, he has essentially become a recluse who spends his time using his unlimited power in the Oasis to destroy the avatars of those that publicly criticise him. His relationship with the other characters has broken down, and his relationship with Artemis is all but over. This just leaves him sulking endlessly. I'm not saying this doesn't work from a character perspective, because it is completely plausible, but I did kind of feel that all the time we spent with these characters in the first book, watching their friendships grow, was just a waste of time, as we had essentially just hit the reset button. I could appreciate this was done to allow Wade's character to rebuild those relationships as part of his arc in this book, but to me it just felt a bit cheap that all this happened before we even start and we are just told, oh by the way, this happened. Then, as the story progresses, pacing remains an issue. In the first book, there were long gaps between each stage of the contest, sometimes months. This allowed the characters to reflect and grow, for new characters to be introduced, and allowed the author to flesh out the world we were experiencing. Here, there is a time limit placed on events, which results in the book moving from stage to stage very quickly. The only character we ever really get to spend any time with is Wade, and the others are largely ignored. Then, although the book tells us each stage of the quest is challenging, it never really feels that way, as there is always one member of the group that just happens to be an expert on that particular world and can walk the others through the quest. But that doesn't mean to say I didn't enjoy the quests. The references are a bit broader this time round, with not so much emphasis put on computer games, but I still found them enjoyable. There were times when I wanted things to be a bit more subtle, and sometimes they were, but I don't always need a character to turn around and point out that that's the character from this movie that done this action, which is important to our story because etc, etc. Most of the time, the best references are those you could easily miss. Then we have the ending, that I both liked and disliked. Without being too spoiler heavy, the book raises some interesting metaphysical questions about eternal life, mind transference and the ethics involved when using technology that can provide this, but then shies away from ever really exploring this theme in any depth. And although the ending does leave the reader with plenty to ponder, I would have liked the book to have spent a bit more time letting the characters themselves face up to this newfound responsibility. There were also a number of political statements surrounding things like race and sexuality that kind of felt out of place in this book. For example, while very short on time and on a quest in a Lord of the Rings world, they have the time to have a discussion about how there are no black people in any of the Lord of the Rings books. A discussion worth having, but one you'd probably want to save until after you have saved the couple of billion people whose lives are currently at risk. This kind of thing happens a few times throughout the book, and each time it just felt a little out of place and almost like it was shoehorned in some vain attempt for the writer to make a political statement. All in all, the book was somewhat of a disappointment. It certainly does have some redeeming moments, just not enough. Is it worth reading? Yes, if you are a fan of the first book, as there is something to enjoy, and despite my overall disappointment, I don't feel it tarnishes my memories of Ready Player One. I just can't help but shake the feeling that the book was written and released under pressure from the movie studios who wanted a sequel to their big budget movie. Did the first book need a sequel? No. Am I happy with this sequel? Mainly, no. Would I have been happy with a sequel full stop? Yes, assuming it was afforded the time and care that the first book most definitely deserved. It just seems that wasn't the case here.